Over the years, I've heard lots of debates about memory versus thinking, that memorizing stuff is bad, but thinking is good. And also, how much thinking do we teach and how much concept knowledge, and how do we know how to do this? Well, it's a little bit like learning styles, very popular for many years, despite the fact that I spent several years debunking it and being treated like I was some kind of idiot. But now I think John Hattie's meta-analysis has totally put that one to bed. So let's put another dangerous myth to bed. Let's kick off with a key point that Willingham makes. When we think someone's thinking, they're usually engaged in memory retrieval. So the kind of process is, do I know this already in my long-term memory? And the great point about long-term memory, Willingham there talks about it being the cognitive process of first resort. In fact, it is the central cognitive structure. If we've got everything we need to know in long-term memory and fully understand it, pretty much any problem we have to solve, we know how to solve it because we've seen it before and learned how to do it. And I think it was Edward de Bono who said something like, in a perfect world, we would not need to think. Because quite simply, if we know all the answers, then we are purely operating effectively at system one thinking, the Kahneman stuff. And it wouldn't be prejudicial or judgmental because it would be factual. It would be the best knowledge available. So what does this mean? Well, in terms of pedagogic implications, firstly, that the idea of teaching people to be skillful in thinking, or perhaps even skillful in anything, is that factual knowledge must precede skill. People are going to know what it is and understand enough to be able to start doing useful, deliberate practice. So this is the big thing. If we want to teach students thinking, we must teach them firstly what good thinking is. They must have knowledge about what good thinking is itself. Then we teach, once they are familiar with what we mean by critical thinking, creative thinking, metacognitive thinking, we then teach the thinking capability, the thinking skills, with the relevant subject content knowledge. So that students are becoming familiar with the knowledge, they are using the cognitive process, and that's how we build understanding. And the second important point that should be made in this context, that people say, well, there's so much knowledge, well, how can we teach so much knowledge, particularly as we now know that kind of the processing system of working memory is pretty slow. Well, teach the key concepts, the most important ones. It's one of the core principles of learning. Teach the concepts and principles that underpin understanding the structure of a subject. As Willingham says, cognitive science leads to the rather obvious conclusion that students must learn the concepts that come up again and again. These are the enduring, key, unifying ideas of each discipline. So, memory and thinking, well, as Willingham once said, that memory is a residual of thinking, something like that. Or in a nutshell, memory is what's left after thinking. So it's not terribly useful to talk about memory and thinking as two distinct, possibly oppositional processes. It is all part of cognition, and cognition must interact with information. There must be the connecting of new information with information from long-term memory in that restricted area of working memory in order for good learning to occur.